Welcome back to Vintage Family Recipes. Tonight we're going fairly far back in time. This is from my grandmother, but it's her mother's. So I'm thinking 1850s, 1860s maybe. And it depends on if she got it, my great-grandmother got it from her mother or not. It's typical of my grandmother. It's a list of ingredients. And then the directions say steam for 2 hours. So I had to do some digging, and I'll talk about that after we get this made as I make it, because it was really fascinating to figure out how they would have steamed bread in that time period. So I'm only going to make a half a batch. I will put both recipes in the description, but I'm just making half batch. So here we go. The first thing I'm going to do is I am going to it gets made in a tin. That's how they did it. They used tin because a lot of people didn't have stoves yet. They still had fireplaces. And so using a tin in your fireplace with a pot of water steaming is one way that you could bake. So the first thing I am going to do though is I am going to oil my pan really well so it does not stick. So that's my first step. I don't know, I'm sure this could probably be made in a bread pan, but I'm not 100% sure. I haven't tried. I decided I was going to do this the way my great-grandmother and grandmother did when she first started making it. And then because my grandmother didn't say anything else, I just decided to be safe and make it this way. Eventually I might get brave and make it in a bread pan, but it would still have to be steamed, so we'll see. The first thing I'm going to add is my half cup of molasses, if I can get it open now that my hands are all greasy. There we go. So my half cup of molasses. And full disclosure, I did make this last week because I thought, I am not going to make this for the very first time on camera and have it be an absolute disaster. So I did make it last week to see what it was like, and it actually came out fairly well. And it's already gone. So the people in my house, in my family, because my son and his wife were over, they had some as well, people liked it. I have found if I'm using molasses and I need to mix it with something, it mixes together much better if I have hot water, half a cup of water. Well, actually it says a cup of water, but I'm cutting it in half. So a half a cup of water. There we go. Sweet milk is whole milk. So I have whole milk here. So I'm going to put in a half a cup of sweet milk. Half a cup of sour milk. She says it needs salt, but she did not put an amount. So I'm just going to put a little bit in my hand. About that much, and dump it in. It also needs baking soda, half a teaspoon. Do it with a quarter of a teaspoon. There we go. Mix those two things together. Cornmeal. 1 cup. We need a cup of cornmeal. My oven is already set to 350 degrees, so it's ready to go. And I will show you that setup as well because I have a pan in there to steam it with. The last thing I need to add is flour. The The original amount is 3 cups, so I'm going to need 1.5 cups. And now we're going to mix this all together. So it is well combined. You can smell the molasses. It smells so good. If you noticed, I did not use yeast, even though it's bread. Yeast could be hard to come by in the mid-1800s. And notice it uses molasses, not sugar. Molasses was definitely cheaper to purchase than sugar was. So now I am going to pour this into my coffee can. I don't think the size necessarily of your coffee can matters as long as the dough fits in. Mine fits in just fine. I will tell you the size of this in just a second. I don't remember what size this is. I specifically bought this coffee can for this recipe. Let me get this. And I will show you how high it comes up in mine. If yours is smaller, you will need to put cooking twine around your tin foil that you cover the pan with so it doesn't pop off as it's baking. Mine will not pop off when I'm baking because it doesn't come all the way to the top of the can. And like I said, this is a half the amount of the original recipe. So there's what it looks like in the pan. You can see that it literally comes to the last. This last line is where the dough stops. Make it nice and tight around your coffee can. If you notice, I have a tin pan that's kind of big. If you have a smaller one, you can use it. And I put water in it. And now I'm going to sit my bread in it. If you notice, the water comes up just about 1.5 inches on the pan. I made sure the water was boiling before I put the bread in, so it's already ready to steam. And now it steams.
Go ahead.
I turned off the oven at 1 hour and 10 minutes. And then I let it steam for the rest of the 2 hours. To test it, do not take the foil off. Push your tester all the way through the foil and pull it out. Once it's done, take it out of the water. Put it on your cooling rack. Take your tin foil off slowly because just like last time, and I said I wasn't going to forget this time, but I did, I forgot to grease my tin foil on the top. So I'm going to take it off very carefully so it doesn't pull too much of the top off. If I'd remembered to grease the tin foil, it wouldn't have pulled the top off. It's a couple of days later from when I made the brown bread the first time. What I've learned with this is you have to make sure that you're patient with taking the bread out of the coffee can. So I did a couple of things differently today when I made the bread. First thing you'll notice is I did grease the top of the tin foil, so the bread did not stick to the tin foil. Then I waited about 1 hour to take the bread out of the pan. And I wanted to do that to make sure I could take the bread out of the pan correctly this time. And by waiting 1 hour, I didn't have to use the serrated knife even to go around the pan. I just wiggled the can, slowly turning it left and right just a little bit, as I'm doing right now, and the bread slid out of the can. So it's a perfect round loaf. And I'll cut it just a couple slices so that you can see it.
And
because the coffee can has lines, so does the bread. And when you get to this portion of it, if you cut the lines, you will actually have the right size slice for the bread. And there is a much thinner slice of bread. So if you look at the two, actually I did pretty good at making it the same size. This is well removed from the can bread. The other bread was edible, but it didn't look edible, and you wouldn't have been able to use it as a sandwich bread. This you can. It's time for our taste test. When you take this out of the coffee can, make sure you're really careful and that your knife is going straight down on the side. If you tip your knife at all, it will cut the bread and the bread will not come out of the coffee can cleanly. So, this is brown bread as it was made in the 1800s. My grandmother's recipe, actually my great-grandmother's recipe. Andrew's gonna try it and give you his honest feedback. I assume he's gonna try the small piece, and I was right.
I'm gonna give my dishonest feedback.
Your dishonest
I
feedback?
cannot be trusted.
Okay.
I can taste the molasses.
I can smell the molasses.
It's kind of like spongy.
Okay.
It's a nice texture. It's firm, but it's not hard.
Okay. So it's more like a banana bread than an actual piece of bread. Or is it somewhere in between?
Kind of.
Okay.
Somewhat.
Okay. Because there's no yeast, I was thinking it was less of like a traditional sandwich bread and more of
Oh yeah, it's definitely not like a loaf of white bread or wheat bread or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, there's no yeast, so there's no leavening really. It's just the baking soda. It's actually fairly easy to make. The two hardest parts, well, I shouldn't even say hard. The longest part is the steaming in your oven. The hardest part is making sure that you don't cut the bread as you're going down into it, because the coffee can is deep and it's rounded. So if you do it wrong, it's still edible. It just won't look pretty plated. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night. If you haven't subscribed yet, take the time. Yeah, that's what it looks like if you do it wrong. I wasn't going to show that, but okay. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe. Hit a like, leave us a comment, and we'll see you next time on Vintage Family Recipes. Good night.